The McDonald's custodian. I don't eat fast food anymore. They say it kills people. I know that to be true, in a way. I haven't eaten McDonald's since December 20th, 2008. Like me, you probably grew up on Happy Meals. We always went to the same McDonald's location. Everything seemed normal and clean. The custodian had a great work ethic. He was always there, tall with long gray hair, unshaven. He looked like Filch from the Harry Potter movies. The custodian seemed to always look down and never smiled. One day, a couple of friends and I decided to have lunch at McDonald's. I saw the custodian polishing the Ronald McDonald statue, which was standing near the registers. My friend Adam somehow tipped his drink over and it fell on the floor, Coke spilling everywhere. The custodian showed up in no time with a mop next to us. When he mopped the last drop, he spaced out for a few seconds. Then he slowly lifted his eyes towards us, almost meeting ours, before scurrying off to the back, disappearing behind the registers. My friends and I all lifted our eyebrows and seemed to say, "What the fuck?" at the same time. We began to give the custodian funny nicknames, Stinky J, J for janitor naturally, and laugh at him. I thought he may have heard us as he walked off, and I felt bad. A few mornings later, I went to McDonald's for a coffee at 6 a.m. As I walked to sit down, I noticed the custodian near the bathrooms. I sipped my coffee, watching his twitchy movements. He was moving the Happy Meal promotional materials there. To the left of the Happy Meal materials was the Ronald McDonald statue. The custodian walked away and returned with some toddler high chairs, which he placed to the left of the statue. He began to turn in my direction, and I think he noticed me for a split second, but he turned back around and looked down at the toddler high chairs. It seemed he spaced out again for a few seconds, then scurried to the back of the restaurant. That same night, I went to a party and left just before midnight. McDonald's was closing soon, so I quickly went, hoping to get there in time. At the entrance was the custodian, the Ronald McDonald statue, promotional materials, and the toddler high chairs. Has the custodian been working for 18 hours? He didn't notice me. I sat down and began eating in a far corner. The clock hit midnight, and the last cashier left. I was almost finished eating. At the other side of the restaurant, the custodian watched the cashier leave. He just stood there frozen for minutes, until she drove away. I watched him disconnect the CCTV cameras. Time to go. I quickly and quietly snuck out and went home. For the next week, I could not stop thinking about the custodian. I'm a private investigator and I like to solve mysteries. I had to solve this one, and I was going to. I woke up excited on December 20th, 2008. The day went by quickly. I got to McDonald's at 10 p.m. that night. Eating my food, I saw promotional materials and toddler high chairs near the bathrooms. The Ronald McDonald statue was behind the registers. The custodian walked up from behind on my left side. As he was a foot in front of me, he stopped and continued to look forward. I stopped eating. He started to move his head, but continued forward. I had second thoughts about my investigations, but decided to stick it out. When I was done eating, I threw my trash out. I glanced around and no one was looking. I quickly slipped into the play place and managed to squeeze in the slide entrance. I hid there for 2 hours. The custodian watched the last cashier drive away again. He proceeded to stand up on the register and disconnect the CCTV cameras. He then disappeared to the back. I noticed a door with a lock, which he opened and entered through. Time went slowly by. Near 1 a.m., I started to get creeped out. I tiptoed extremely slowly towards the registers. I could have heard a pin drop, it was so quiet. I passed the Ronald McDonald statue to walk behind the registers. I was heading to the back where I heard noises. The noises were getting faintly louder, and I realized they were moving in my direction. I quickly knelt down to get underneath a counter. It was then I was struck down by what felt like a piece of metal. When I woke up, I was bound with my hands tied behind my back. I was on an old soft couch and smelled like piss. I knew by the faith candle, which was lit, that I was in the small room in the back. There was a rusty sink, tools, and an old TV. The Ronald McDonald statue, a few gallons of water, and many Happy Meal toys scattered around the room. In one corner out of the shadows, the custodian stood up. He, for the first time, made eye contact with me. I saw in his eyes, if I were to describe it in one word, wild. He began to scurry towards me, keeping his gaze. I was frozen. I couldn't do anything else. He was hiding a sharp object in his hand. I knew it was the end. I just hoped it was quick. He cut the rope which bound my wrists. He pierced me with his wild eyes, and in a low, raspy voice he said, "Run." The custodian's head seemed to disappear into the wall as it was replaced by the swinging porcelain fist. I looked up at the Ronald McDonald statue, whose painted smile seemed to grow bigger and bigger. Without thinking, I stood up, juked in one direction faking my motion, and did a ninja roll in the other direction around the Ronald McDonald statue. I ran out of the door. Flying past the registers, I exited the building and got in my car. I put it in drive and looked in the rearview mirror. Inside McDonald's, near the door, is the Ronald McDonald statue. I put the pedal to the metal and peeled out of the parking lot. The next week, that McDonald's location was closed for renovations. I didn't care. It's obvious I'll never go back. Not to that one. Not to any. I no longer need to investigate what's out of my league. I know enough. I'm reminded every time I pass that location. Always there in the window is the Ronald McDonald statue looking out. The weirdo at McDonald's. When I was growing up, my dad and I lived with my grandparents. My parents had me while they were teenagers, and my dad got full custody because he lived with my grandparents, and my mom was just living with random friends, going from house to house every few weeks. I was the daughter my grandparents never had, and they doted on me. When I was 6, my grandpa passed away from cancer. This story takes place about 5 months after he passed away. This was, I believe, a Saturday, and my dad was at work. My grandma decided to take me to McDonald's for lunch, and like any 6-year-old, I was really excited. So we go to the McDonald's that was about 1.5 miles from our house, order our lunch, and sit down at a table to eat. At the time, we were the only ones eating inside. About 10 minutes after we sit down, a scraggly-looking man walks in, orders a meal, and sits down at the table diagonally in front of us to the left. The area we lived in was middle and upper middle class, so this guy looked pretty out of place. Grandma had her back to him, but I could see him perfectly. This man was at least in his mid-50s, with really wiry, scraggy, and dirty white hair and a beard. He had on blue shorts and a white t-shirt, also kinda dirty, and sandals. It's amazing. This happened 21 years ago and I can remember it like it was yesterday. So I noticed that, under the table, this man has something dark pink and wrinkly on his lap, and he kept glancing at me and rubbing it every few seconds. In kindergarten, we learned about stranger danger and good touch, bad touch, and learned which parts of our body people weren't supposed to touch. It clicked in my 6-year-old head that this man was not supposed to have that out like that, nor doing what he was doing. I didn't want to tell my grandma right then and there because I thought the man would hurt us. If my dad had been there, I would have said something because my dad was my hero and could take on anybody. Instead, I put my Happy Meal box in front of my face so my view of this guy would be blocked. I had about half of my food left, but have lost my appetite. Grandma asked me if I was full, and I just nodded yes. I was, and still am, very petite, so not finishing a full meal was nothing new for me. She asked me if I wanted to go play in the play area before we left, but I just shook my head and quietly said, "I want to go home." Grandma cleared our table and we left. When we got home, I was still really nervous, and I felt like I was going to throw up. Grandma asked me, "What's the matter, Munchkin?" her pet name for me, and I started crying and told her about the man at McDonald's and what I saw. My grandma didn't panic or freak or get hysterical. She just hugged me and said, "It's all right. Go on to your room and play and I'll take care of it." She wiped my tears, gave me a blueberry Kool-Aid burst, and told our dog Patches to go to my room with me, which she did. After I was out of earshot, Grandma called the McDonald's and told them about the guy. He was still there. The manager told Grandma he'd take care of it and call her back. An hour later, the manager calls back and tells Grandma they called the police, who showed up in record time and arrested the guy. When the police told the man to stand up, his dick and balls were still hanging out of his shorts. The manager also told Grandma that she could bring me back for a month's worth of coupons for free Happy Meals. I didn't really care though.